The record begins with a mistake that seemed small at the time. A distant star system showed signs of life, industry, and organized movement, but nothing that looked impressive to the eyes of an old empire. The royal analysts studied the images and reports and reached a calm agreement. The species calling itself human was active, curious, and expanding, but not dangerous. There were no massive fleets on display, no energy signatures that suggested planet-killing weapons, and no signs of unified military posture. To the Royal Council, this looked like a young civilization still learning how to stand. The royals believed in order. They believed strength showed itself clearly. If a species was powerful, it would show power openly. Humans did not do that. Their space lanes were quiet. Their stations were modest. Their ships were small. This made the decision easy. A limited force would enter the system, observe reactions, and apply pressure. Not war, just a test. The Council approved the deployment with little debate. A forward task group moved into the outer region of human-controlled space. It was meant to be routine. The commanders were told to expect panic or surrender. At most, they might face local patrols. The royals watched from afar, confident and curious, already discussing trade terms and future boundaries. The first contact did not happen near a major world. Instead, it happened near a quiet human outpost, close to a debris field. Sensors detected a small cluster of human ships approaching. They were not large. They did not move in tight formation. There was no dramatic display. Just a few vessels drifting into position, as if they had all the time in the universe. The alien commanders felt relief. This confirmed everything they believed. These were scouts at best. Maybe even civilian craft pressed into service. The order was given to surround them and demand surrender. The message was transmitted in a formal tone, translated into human language with careful accuracy. The reply was short. It did not sound angry or afraid. It simply stated that the humans would not comply and that the aliens should leave the area. There were no threats, no long speeches, just a refusal. This confused the commanders. They expected fear. They expected negotiation. Instead, they received calm resistance from a force that should not have felt confident at all. Still, the situation did not seem serious. The commanders assumed the humans were bluffing. The first move came from the human side, but it was not an attack. The small ships spread out, drifting behind debris and shadowed angles. Their signals grew quieter. Some vanished from sensors entirely. The alien officers assumed this was disorganization or fear. They advanced. Moments later, systems began to fail. Not all at once, just enough to cause irritation. Targeting lagged. Communication channels filled with static. A support vessel lost power and drifted off course. There was no single obvious cause. No clear enemy fire. The human ships reappeared briefly, striking with precise bursts aimed not at hulls, but at sensors and control points. Then they vanished again. The damage was not fatal, but it was embarrassing. A superior force was being touched and pulled apart by something smaller. The alien crews felt the shift in mood. This was no longer routine. The humans were not acting like amateurs. They moved like professionals who knew exactly how much risk to take and when to disappear. They never stayed long enough to be fully targeted. The commanders ordered a stronger push. Drones were deployed. Defensive screens were widened. The fleet advanced deeper, determined to end the encounter quickly. That decision would later be remembered as the second mistake. The humans let them advance. They did not block the path. Instead, they guided it. Each movement by the alien fleet triggered another small problem. A navigation error here. A misread signal there. The commanders began to notice a pattern too late. The humans were shaping the battlefield without claiming it. One human vessel was finally cornered near the debris field. Alien weapons locked on. The capture order was prepared. At the last moment, the human ship cut power and drifted, blending perfectly with the surrounding wreckage. When the aliens moved closer, hidden charges detonated, disabling 2 escorts without destroying them. The blast was controlled, measured, and deliberate. The message was clear. The humans could have killed. They chose not to. This realization unsettled the officers more than destruction would have. It suggested restraint, confidence, and rules. Only experienced forces operated that way. Only those who expected to survive the long term, worried about consequences. Reports streamed back to the royal observers. They saw the data, the losses, the confusion. At first, they assumed incompetence among field commanders. Then they reviewed the footage themselves. Silence filled the council chamber. The humans were not fighting like a cornered species. They were fighting like testers. Each move looked designed to learn something. Reaction times, formation habits, command responses. The scouts were mapping behavior, not just space. The alien fleet attempted a coordinated strike to end the harassment. The moment orders were issued, false signals flooded the network. Some ships received commands that looked authentic, but led them into poor positions. Others hesitated, unsure which instructions were real. The humans exploited that hesitation with perfect timing. No large explosions followed. Instead, more systems failed. Engines stalled. Shields flickered. A command ship lost its external sensors entirely and had to rely on internal instruments. Panic crept in, not as fear, but as doubt. The commanders could no longer be sure of anything. The human scouts transmitted another message. It was still calm, still brief. It stated that this was a warning encounter, and that further advance would lead to escalation. There was no boasting, no declaration of victory. The Royal Council felt a chill they had not known in generations. A warning from a scout unit made no sense under their old rules. Scouts observed. Armies warned. Empires threatened. Humans did not follow those lines. As the fleet struggled to regain control, one final report arrived. Long-range sensors detected additional human signatures far away, unmoving and silent. They did not approach. They did not intervene. They simply existed, like a reminder that this small group was not alone. The commanders requested permission to withdraw and reassess. Pride argued against it. Survival argued louder. The order to pause operations was given, framed as a temporary adjustment. The fleet began pulling back, damaged but intact. The human scouts did not pursue. They observed until the aliens crossed a clear boundary, then vanished entirely. No celebration followed. No final message. Just absence. In the quiet that followed, the Royal Council reviewed everything again. They could no longer pretend this was a misunderstanding. The humans had controlled the encounter from the first moment. They had decided how far it would go, and when it would end. One truth became impossible to ignore. If this had been a true battle, the outcome would have been worse. Much worse. These humans were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were watchers, testers, and problem solvers sent ahead of something larger. The record of Part 1 ends with a simple note entered into the Royal Archives. The first contact had failed, not because of defeat in battle, but because of defeat in understanding. The Empire had looked at humanity and seen weakness. Humanity had looked back and measured everything. The retreat of the alien fleet was quiet but tense. Commanders whispered to one another in unspoken fear. None had expected to be tested so thoroughly by a group of ships they had assumed were scouts. The humans had not attacked in the usual way. They had not fought with overwhelming force. Instead, they had shown control, patience, and intelligence, qualities that made the aliens uneasy. When the fleet returned to safe space, the Royal Council convened immediately. Analysts pored over every sensor reading, every message, every movement of the human ships. The data told a story that was clear and terrifying. The humans had not tried to destroy. They had tried to observe and learn. They had carefully measured reactions, weaknesses, and habits. Every move of the aliens had been predicted, studied, and countered. Nothing about the encounter was random. The Council began to understand something the commanders had felt instinctively. They had underestimated humans. They had assumed that size, technology, and history of conquest were what mattered most. But humans had something different. They had creativity, adaptability, and courage. They had the ability to think clearly under pressure and to make decisions that no one else could predict. A senior officer explained it simply. "We did not fight their army," he said. "We fought their scouts, and we barely survived." The room fell silent. This statement was correct. The scout unit alone had tested the fleet, and yet it had caused confusion, hesitation, and failure in operations that were supposed to be routine. Reports continued to arrive. Other human units had been monitoring the encounter from a distance. They had not engaged. They had only observed and reported. The Council realized that humans operated in ways they did not understand. Strategy was not only about firepower, but about control, psychology, and planning. Over the following days, analysts tried to simulate the encounter. They ran countless models, hoping to find a way the aliens could have succeeded. Every simulation failed. The humans anticipated every approach, every tactic, every change in formation. It was as if the scouts were always one step ahead, seeing angles the aliens could not perceive. The Council began discussions about policy. There had been talk for decades of exploring the outer systems, of claiming territory and resources. Now that talk changed. Fear entered the conversation. Respect too, but more importantly, fear. The humans had shown that conventional methods would not work. They had demonstrated that caution was essential. Even among the younger advisors, the realization was shocking. They had grown up hearing stories of empires that dominated planets with fleets and weapons. Humans had none of that invisible force, yet they were not weak. They were smart. They were patient. They were adaptable. They were not predictable, and that made them dangerous. The commanders who had faced the scouts were debriefed in detail. They described how humans had exploited tiny mistakes. One officer recalled how a simple misalignment in sensors caused hesitation across 3 ships. Another remembered how a single human ship had guided 2 larger alien vessels into positions where their own weapons could not fire effectively. Every small decision by the humans had caused cascading problems. The Council realized that humans were not reckless. They had rules, discipline, and understanding of consequence. They did not need to overwhelm an enemy with power. They could do more with less, and that principle was what had saved them during the encounter. The royal records of the encounter were carefully written. There was no shame in admitting mistakes, no need to blame lower officers. The records stated plainly that the human scout unit had operated with intelligence, calmness, and restraint. They had not sought to destroy, only to test. And in doing so, they had forced a superior fleet to retreat without any real fighting. The Council issued new protocols for future contact with humans. Observation would be prioritized over engagement. Any approach would be cautious, measured, and designed to learn, not to conquer. Human capabilities were now a benchmark for how unpredictable and intelligent life could be. The story would be studied for generations as a lesson in humility and caution. In private chambers, some advisors reflected on what had happened. They realized that humans could fight in ways no one else in the galaxy could predict. They understood timing, psychology, and problem-solving at a level that made old tactics obsolete. One said quietly, "They do not fight like anyone else. They fight like humans." For the humans, the encounter was another day of duty. They had carried out their mission with calm and discipline, unaware of how much they had shaken an entire empire. They had not boasted, and they did not seek glory. Their goal had been simple: gather information, test limits, and protect their space. They had done it with precision, without fear, and without unnecessary force. The Royal Council would remember the lesson clearly. They would never again assume weakness based on appearances. Humans were patient, smart, and resilient. They were not easily intimidated. A single scout unit had shown the Empire that size and strength were not always the most important factors. Intelligence, adaptability, and courage could turn the tables in unexpected ways. The record concludes with a warning to future leaders. Humans may seem small, their ships modest, their resources limited, but they have the power to think, to adapt, and to endure. Underestimating them would be a mistake no empire could afford twice. The encounter left a permanent mark on the Council, a humbling reminder that true strength often comes in unexpected forms. The humans had not needed an army to show their power, they had only needed themselves.